On September 3, 1949, a U.S. Air Force plane flying from Japan to Alaska detected something impossible in the upper atmosphere, the unmistakable signature of a detonated atomic bomb. The problem? Only one nation on Earth was believed to hold such power. A specially equipped U.S. plane picked up radiation readings off the coast of Siberia, telegraphing the event. The Soviet Union had successfully detonated its first atomic bomb on August 29, 1949. Panic seized the American High Command. A terrifying phantom cloud of fallout meant the world had secretly changed overnight. Somewhere a second secret fire had been lit. But who had stolen the apocalypse, and what dark pacts forged this new world-ending horror? The year was 1945. The Second World War had ended not with a sigh of relief, but with a blinding flash of light over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At the Yalta and Potsdam conferences, the victorious Big Three, the United States, the Soviet Union, and Great Britain, gathered to draw the map of a new world from the ashes of the old. They spoke of freedom and self-determination, but in private, they carved up continents into spheres of influence. Joseph Stalin, the iron-fisted ruler of the USSR, had no intention of relinquishing the Eastern European nations his Red Army had liberated from the Nazis. President Harry Truman, new to his office and holding the secret of the atomic bomb, saw a world that needed American leadership. Truman became president on April 12, 1945, and was informed about the atomic bomb project after taking office. And Winston Churchill, before being replaced by Clement Attlee during the Potsdam Conference, saw a dark new reality taking shape across the European continent. On March 5, 1946, Churchill gave this new reality a name. In a speech in Fulton, Missouri, he declared that an iron curtain has descended across the continent. The line was drawn. In the Greek Civil War, American and British agents backed royalists against communist insurgents supplied by their Soviet-backed neighbors. When Stalin refused to withdraw his troops from northern Iran after the war, violating a wartime agreement, the world held its breath until international pressure, largely through the newly formed UN, reportedly forced his hand. To counter the appeal of communism in the ruins of Western Europe, the United States unveiled the Marshall Plan in 1947. A colossal economic aid package of over $13 billion. It was an act of generosity that doubled as a weapon of ideological warfare. Stalin saw it as dollar imperialism and forbade any of his new satellite states from accepting the aid. He countered with his own brutal consolidation of power, orchestrating communist coups in Hungary and Czechoslovakia by 1948. The world was splitting in two, and every political move, every shipment of grain, every whispered word from an embassy was now an act in a global shadow war. The shadow war found its first physical front line in the divided city of Berlin. Deep inside Soviet-controlled East Germany, the Western-occupied sectors of the city stood as a glaring island of capitalism and freedom. On June 24, 1948, Stalin made his move. He ordered all rail, road, and canal access to West Berlin cut off, sealing over 2 million people from the outside world. He believed he could starve the city into submission, forcing the Western allies to abandon it. It was a naked act of aggression, a siege that could easily ignite a third world war. But instead of sending in tanks, the West sent planes. The Berlin airlift began, a staggering, unprecedented operation, where American and British pilots flew over 278,000 missions in just under a year, delivering everything from food and coal to medicine and candy. For 11 months, the world watched as a city was kept alive from the sky. A silent, tense battle of wills waged thousands of feet above the heart of Europe. Stalin was forced to lift the blockade in May 1949, a humiliating public defeat. But the Kremlin had been nurturing a far more powerful response in total secrecy. The data from that Air Force flight in September 1949 was confirmed. The Soviet Union had successfully detonated its own atomic bomb, codenamed RDS-1. On September 23rd, a stunned President Truman was forced to announce to the world that America's nuclear monopoly was over. The West's ultimate trump card, the weapon that had guaranteed its security, was now in the hands of its greatest adversary. The terrifying doctrine of mutually assured destruction was born. The world no longer feared a conventional war of tanks and soldiers. It now lived in the shadow of instant, global annihilation. There were now 2 fingers hovering over the button that could end human history. That horrifying new reality erupted into a hot, bloody war on June 25, 1950. Backed by Stalin and newly communist China under Mao Zedong, around 75,000 North Korean soldiers stormed across the 38th parallel, invading South Korea. The Cold War had found its first true battlefield. The United States, leading a UN coalition, intervened to stop the communist advance. General Douglas MacArthur, a celebrated hero of the Pacific War, orchestrated a brilliant amphibious landing at Incheon that shattered the North Korean army. But as UN forces pushed north toward the Chinese border, some historians believe MacArthur's arrogance led them into a trap. In October 1950, hundreds of thousands of Chinese soldiers poured across the Yalu River in massive attacks, driving the UN forces into a desperate, bloody retreat. Faced with catastrophic defeat, an enraged MacArthur publicly demanded the authority to use atomic bombs on Chinese cities, with some reports suggesting he requested as many as 26. The world stood on the absolute brink. For the first time, a nuclear exchange between superpowers was not a theoretical horror, but an active military proposal on a president's desk. President Truman refused. He would later fire his most popular general, in part to prevent a global nuclear holocaust. But the question that haunted the West remained. How had the Soviets developed the bomb so quickly, years ahead of most intelligence estimates? The answer to the mystery of the second fire was not just a story of scientific genius, but of silent, ideological betrayal. In January 1950, British authorities arrested Klaus Fuchs, a brilliant German-born physicist. Fuchs was not just any scientist. He had been a key member of the Manhattan Project at Los Alamos. For years, driven by his communist convictions, he had systematically passed the most vital secrets of the atomic bomb, including, according to historical records, detailed blueprints for the Fat Man plutonium weapon directly to his Soviet handlers. The silent architects of the Soviet nuclear program weren't just in Moscow. They had been standing in the heart of America's most secret project all along. The Cold War was not forged in the halls of diplomacy or on the battlefields of Korea. It was born in the quiet, treacherous spaces in between, in the mind of a scientist who believed in a different future, in the secret files passed in darkened parks, in the silent pacts made not between nations, but between men who chose ideology over loyalty. The illusion of a post-war peace was gone forever. The world was now locked in a permanent struggle, living under a nuclear shadow built not only by its declared enemies, but by the unseen architects who had delivered the apocalypse into their hands.